For this video, I wanted to walk you through my decision-making process for drawing manga, specifically focusing on page 2 of the first chapter. This page sets up the confrontation between the characters Thais and Achel, getting them ready to fight. But before we jump into the time-lapse, I just wanted to quickly talk about how I set up my page. I use a standard manga page size template, 5.5 inches by 7.75 inches. At 2940 pixels width by 4170 pixel height. I scale up my initial thumbnails, which were bare bone sketches meant to outline the character's placement and actions. You just want something on the page so you could build off of. For the manga borders, I used a brush with no pen sensitivity and kept a solid thickness throughout. Monoline in Procreate is a perfect brush for that. Moving on to the first roughs. These are more detailed than the thumbnails, but still loose and gestural. I also incorporate dialogue bubble placements at this stage. It's just so I know that I shouldn't be drawing anything detailed in these parts. This is actually probably the last time these two talk to each other in this whole chapter. The rest of it is just them beating the shit out of each other. Then I proceed to the second pass, starting with more complex poses and breaking down the characters into basic mannequins for better 3D visualization. The trap you can fall into is making your characters look a little rigid when you do these mannequin passes. So if your characters start feeling a little stiff, this is probably why. Sometimes you don't nail it on your first try, and that's okay. These poses are straight from my head. I've done plenty of life drawing, so I can figure out how to place the character in 3D space. Sometimes I just can't visualize and twist the form in my head. So when I come back for a cleaner rough, I'll find reference and get everything more exact. Having an animation background, we're taught posing is king, so you better believe I don't lack when it comes to making nice poses to tell a story. Sometimes all you need is a good pose that can show you instead of having to tell the readers. By the third pass, characters begin taking shape. It's also finally time I start thinking about backgrounds at this point. I want the characters to now start looking more like their character sheets, giving them the trademark look. Even then, it's not 100%. It's more of a first coat of paint. I just need to know I'm headed in the right direction with these details. I often use references or posable mannequins like sticky bones to refine poses and correct inaccuracies. I'll pose them out, angle the camera, and snap a quick picture. If you don't have something like this, you can just take a picture of yourself doing the pose, or find a pose similar to what you have in mind online. I knew I wanted to change up Thais' pose quite a bit. The leg and the overall body direction was off, so I posed out the sticky bones and started redrawing it, and got something I was more pleased with. In between all of these rough passes, a week's worth of time has gone by. That's because I was doing the whole chapter chronologically. So the further you get into the chapters, the looser and more expressive my poses and paneling get, which might be a downside for the earlier pages, but I try to stay consistent regardless. You'll see in these later stages I come back to the roughs with a lot more energy because I've been drawing consistently and my eyes just gotten sharper. We're finally at the last rough pass. We're getting into the end game now. At this point, I'm figuring everything out. How the hands will look, folds, eye directions, anything and everything that can help them look on model and appealing. Oof, I think for me my biggest weakness is drawing front-on faces. It's just so damn hard. But the drawing of Achel at the bottom turned out pretty decent. Sometimes the roughs from the other passes are good enough that you're just following the lines you created before. Other times it's okay to stray away. This will be the last time, so I really want to lock down everything. Once I'm inking, I don't want any surprises. I want to zone out and move on autopilot. A good rule of thumb is to have a background in at least one of your panels on each page. This way your reader can orient who and what is around. It'll also help with making the characters grounded in the world they're creating. The backgrounds in this story are very simple. Large cliff sides and mountains with some trees sprinkled throughout. And since this is a large vacant area, I don't have to really keep in mind where specific objects are in relation to others. If it was a room, I'd plan out a top-down view of everything in it, so I could view and draw it from every angle I put the camera in. We're finally at the inking pass. At this point, I've done all the hard work in planning. You can just go in and drop all the inks and can relax without any worries. Toss on a podcast or jam out to music while I ink. My inking style for this manga is a little different than most. Instead of using a brush I can change the line weight and get nice thick and thin lines with, I've decided to go with a brush that is relatively consistent and thin. This is just a personal choice for the style of this manga. It's because I like the clean look of it, and if down the line I wanted to add color, I could do it in a very TV anime style. With these final inks, I'm really looking into adding depth back into my drawings, so I always visualize an overarching 3D shape when I'm laying down these inks, which I sometimes purposely leave out of my roughs so I can focus on gesture and keeping my roughs alive. This is really the most satisfying part of the process, seeing your character come to life with all these details. You should always warm up before you do any physical activity, even drawing. These two are quite aware of that. The two poses at the bottom are heavily inspired by Goku and Vegeta. Hell, even the background and overall setting are based on the first fight they had. This short battle manga is all about the theme of rivalry and opposing dualities in yin and yang. There are moments where I might even ignore my drawing underneath. In this case, I was thinking of having Thea's foot roll off the heel. You could feel the tension in the back heel before, and it felt uncomfortable being straight on the ground. I would highly suggest getting into the pose yourself if you're having trouble drawing it. In animation, we're consistently acting out our scenes to learn the body mechanics that come with the actions. Sometimes feeling how an action moves your body will help you inform the drawing and the pose. I will get moments where I do have to go back to the rough stage and redraw something. In this case, I didn't like how far apart his legs were. I wanted them to have a bit more solidity and depth to them. I mentioned you should have everything figured out by your final roughs, but the process is a push and pull sometimes, and if you need to go back to make something look better, then by all means, don't be afraid. I set a workflow for myself so I can have many achievable milestones and see progression, but that should never stop you from revisiting an idea. Backgrounds in anything perspective based isn't really my wheelhouse, though I do know enough to get around. That's why for this short manga I decided to do a vast and open environment to make it easier on myself. The terrain is based off of a place in Canada called Drumheller. It's a town in Alberta. For someone who's lived in the bigger cities, it was surreal seeing the barren desert-like landscape. Also, if you're into dinosaurs, it's got one of the largest collections of fossils at the Royal Tyrrell Museum. This is as far as I'll get with this page. It's about 80% complete. The rest of the things will be adding in deep blacks, screen tones, and sound effects. But I want to leave a bit of the surprise for the actual release. I hope you enjoyed me rambling. I tried to be as informative as I could with my process. If you have any questions or even better workflow tips, please let me know in the comments below. Alright, that's enough of me yapping. See you on the next one.